How many of you know someone who has passed away from heart disease, stroke, or cancer? Raise your hand. Keep your hand up. No, I'm not going to trick you about the secretary business. How many of you think that disease is random? Keep your hand up. How many of you think that it's hereditary? Keep your hand up. I used to think it was hereditary. 6 years ago, my cholesterol was high. I went to my Western medicine doctor, and she reviewed my history. My dad's had coronary artery disease since he was 67. And she said, well, it runs in your family. The high cholesterol runs in your family. It's hereditary. You need to take these statin drugs for the rest of your life. Well, I've discovered something, and I don't take any drugs today. My cholesterol is 140. Heart disease is not hereditary. And I'm gonna show you some data and that turned my thinking upside down and let you evaluate it. Our vision, my beautiful and amazing wife and I have a vision of health for life. And that's not just us, it's everybody. And so we have a mission to help others through education and support to become healthy in mind, body, and spirit. We'd like to be able to spread the message of things that we have learned so that others can have an opportunity to change their lifestyle and live in a way that will allow them to live life healthy rather than die in disease and illness. So this is club age and older age. Running at 101. I'm looking at Lyle and Kay. I think they're on their way. In another 50 years or so, they'll be running at 101. And do you remember Jack LaLanne? This was Jack at age 95. He wrote a book, Live Young Forever, when he was 95. I want to introduce you to this book that really turned my thinking upside down, The China Study by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. He's a nutritional biochemist at Cornell University for 40 years. And I'll show you some of the work that he did and put together in his book. I'll start with a couple of definitions. And this was some lab work that he did. Foci are precursor clusters of cells that grow into tumors. Aflatoxin, carcinogenic chemical produced by fungus. Some of you may have remembered some of this information from a speech I did in November, although some of you are newer than that. And I went through the presentation, but I didn't tell you what it was that was the fertilizer for this aflatoxin. So this was an experiment that he did in the lab. He exposed these foci to aflatoxin, and then he exposed it to animal protein. And what he found was that the aflatoxin, these precursor cells that would grow into tumors, just exploded at a 20% dietary level, which is a normal kind of level. A lot of carcinogenic research is done at the 100x or 1000x the dietary level, and it's carcinogenic. Well, this isn't even the carcinogen we're talking about, as you can see from the next slide. With a lower amount of aflatoxin and a higher amount of aflatoxin, but lower protein from animals, it's the fertilizer, in a sense, that causes the carcinogenic material to grow. And he also looked at some other proteins, gluten protein and soy protein at the 20% level. And you can see it's just a small amount compared to the animal protein. The effect is only present with animal protein. But the story gets a little bit more scary when you start looking at some real data from populations. This is breast cancer versus animal fat intake, and its consumption by countries. Now, some of these graphs weren't, this was research that Colin Campbell did and put into his book, so he didn't actually do this research, but so there's references in the book. But you can see a very nice correlation, and I've circled the U.S. up there. We have a high animal fat intake and also a high mortality rate from breast cancer. The story gets worse. You can look at heart disease, and this is a percent of calories coming from animal protein. Same kind of story. And that was age 55 to 59. I fall into that age group, by the way. Type 1 diabetes, cow milk consumption versus incidence of type 1 diabetes. It's a pretty scary story. Multiple sclerosis. Milk consumption versus the incidence of multiple sclerosis. Hip fractures. Who knew? The more milk you drink, the higher incidence of hip fractures. And the idea is that when you drink milk, it's acidic. It causes your body to be acidic, and then calcium will leach out of your bones to neutralize that acidic part of your body. There are a lot better sources of calcium. Now I want to briefly talk about some work that Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn did in his book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. He was a heart surgeon for 11 years, noticed that his patients weren't getting any healthier, so he took 18 very severely diseased patients and put them on a plant-based whole food diet. And what he found is that after 3 years, you can see the image on the left with the constricted artery, and on the right, after 3 years of the plant-based whole food, the artery looks normal. These people were virtually on their deathbed, and 26 years later, 5 of them died for other causes. Are you ready? Are you ready to pace yourself? Today's theme. Are you ready to question? Are you ready to look at ingredients? Are you ready to consider new information?